Hey guys, I got a video I've been working very hard on for a while here. I've been wanting to do this for a while. This is going to be 12 things you probably didn't know about Dauntless. And if you're a new player, an intermediate player, most of these you're probably not going to know. If you're a veteran player, you still might not know a couple of these things. I've been playing this game for more than two and a half years, and I learned one thing from this as I was doing research on something else that I knew was already pretty weird knowledge. Now, the order that I'm going to do these in are going to be extremely useful, more common things, and the deeper into the video you get, the more rare and more bizarre and more kind of interesting these are going to get. They might not be super useful, but it's definitely going to be something interesting that you probably didn't know towards the end there. So with that, I'm going to jump right in with what I think is the most useful thing. Alright guys, first thing I'm going to cover here is Overpower. Now, the Overpower ability says plus bonus damage to staggered behemoths, and that is only very partially correct. It kind of misleads you into thinking that it's part of, that is the wrong section, it's part of the stagger ability, which is mainly from axes and hammers. And that is 100% not true. It works, yes, it does work on stagger, but it also works on behemoths that have just got a part broken and they are down on the ground. For example, if you break one of Hellion or Pangar's legs, they fall to the ground. Most behemoths have some kind of fall down, like you can see in the display here. The Gnasher is getting knocked to the ground. I believe if you break his leg, he also has the same animation and falls to the ground like that for a second or two. Overpower affects that. Two, it also affects damage threshold knockdowns, like Skarn's ability where he stands up on his back legs. If you hit him with a heavy attack, he will stumble backwards and fall down. You get overpower bonus on that. Some other quick examples I can think of for that case are Koshai when he climbs his tree, or Malkarian when he eats somebody. Heavy attacks will knock them down and you get that overpower bonus. And then finally, boops, or the proper term, interrupt. When a behemoth is rushing at you and you interrupt them, they will collapse to the ground, usually in some kind of violent animation, and then you get that overpower bonus. So definitely run overpower as much as you can. If you want to see a demonstration here real quick, I have overpower on this build. As you can see here, I have the overpower. Now I'm going to see if I can bait this Scrave into an attack. Now I'm going to get a close range attack here, 261. All my bonuses are wearing off. Hopefully, yep, he's doing it right now, just as I thought. So I'm going to boop him. I got no bonus from that. And 330, so there's the proof that the overpower bonus works on more than just staggers. Alright, the second thing I'm going to talk about here is the attack speed cap. Now, they put this out in the patch notes a while back when they put the attack speed cap on, which I believe was at the same time they did the Omnicell update. So if you're new, you would potentially have no idea about this, because I don't think they really mention it anywhere in-game. So the attack speed cap is 50%. Please let me know if I'm wrong on this. Somebody said it might be 55% at one point, but I don't think I believe them. I'm pretty sure the patch note said 50%. So with that being the case, you have to look at a couple things when you're doing your builds, and that's making sure you don't go over the attack speed cap, because that'll kind of reduce your maximum potential there. You're kind of wasting points. So with a weapon like repeaters, you got to take into account Captain Script naturally has a 15% attack speed increase. You got to look at some weapons have mods that give you a small attack speed increase, so you got to look at that. You got to look at your bond. Some bonds have attack speed increases on them. And of course you have Assassin's Frenzy, which has, actually, let me look at this build real quick. The Assassin's Frenzy will also give you some attack speed increase. Now, this also very important to look at some other things, like your Slayer's Path. Let me Where's the zoom out button? There it is. You go... No, I am dumb. I went the total opposite direction. It's going to be at the top here. If you have your striker reforges at 10, you're getting an extra 5% right there, so make sure to take that into account with your attack speed. Also, if you're doing escalations, make sure to check your escalation attack speed boosts. I don't think that many of them have attack speed increases, but I know for sure that Frost has it. Where is it? Here we go. Cold Rush is 15% increased attack speed. So you try to take all these things into account when you're making your builds. Obviously, if you're making an escalation build, Frost is typically the thing you want to do for speed leveling because you get a lot of damage boosts from taking the Avatar of Destruction. So always remember that you get an extra 15% from here. And typically when I'm doing escalations also, I try to cap my attack speed out around 30-35% because most of the time you're picking up either Pact of Swiftness or why can't I think of the name right now? The one where you use your lantern and get 15% extra attack speed. I'm drawing a blank on what it's called right now. But there's several things in there that will just give you more attack speed. So try to leave room for some of those when you take them because they're great amps and will fill out your attack speed there. And with that, I am going to move on to my next segment. Alright guys, now on to my next segment. We have the Rift Stalker Bond ability. Now, the Rift Stalker Bond ability is worded a little differently here, and it makes it seem like you can only get one orb per hit, but that is not the case. It can actually go up multiple times based on how much damage you do, based on what weapon you're playing. So if you're playing a weapon that does lots of big damage, like Axe per se, let me grab a red orb here to make sure I cap out my damage, and you get high random. I really wish you could have private training grounds. And you do a big single hit here. You'll see I have no orbs right now, so let's just do an axe throw. And now I have 8 orbs. You see they popped up there. I have all the orbs dancing around behind me. Well, that's significantly more than just one. So just to kind of reinforce what I'm saying here, we're going to look at this bond ability right here. On chance, after dealing damage, generate shadow orbs that grant damage bonus. So like I said, it makes it seem like it's only giving you at most 1 per hit, but that is not the case. So take advantage of this when you're playing weapons that do big damage and run that Shadow Rift Stalker Bond, because it's pretty good. Alright, the next thing that I'm going to let you guys know is that all damage is modified by your damage bonus. Now this, I believe, isn't said anywhere in the game for pretty much any reason, but everything in the game that it tells you it has some kind of damage output, like for example, Marksman Chamber says it does 250 damage, 350 empowered, or this does 400 damage, or you have your lantern that says it does 2,750 damage. That is all based on your power bonus. Now, the power bonus is in the upper right hand of the screen, and it's modified further by quite a few things. So as you can see, things like Berserker says plus 3.5% damage. That actually modifies your power bonus as well. So when you have all these things stacked, for example, so if you have 10 Berserker stacks and you pop your Broadside Lantern, it's going to do more damage than if you didn't have those Berserker stacks up, because it's modified further by the power rating. This takes into account lots of crazy things. It takes bonus damage off of Overpower if they're down, takes bonuses off of Predator. In most cases, your damage bonus is affected by pretty much everything. And the best way, to my knowledge, to check your total power bonus is actually to go into missions, and you can further see it modified by your elemental damage bonus. So as you can see here, blaze weapons do bonus damage, frost weapons do less. So my weapon power goes down to 425 because I am running a frost weapon on that particular build. But if I switch over to a blaze weapon, you can now go check it again, and you can see that it says 569. Nice. So take into account these things when you're looking at an ability, and you're like, oh, it only adds, or this ability only does, you know, a few points of damage. Particularly something like precision sights, where it says it does 8 increased damage, stacks up to 5 times. That seems like an extremely small amount, but when you apply all of the attack rating bonuses to that and the power modifier, it gets a lot bigger. So keep that in mind when you're making builds. All right, I got a fun little thing about axe here for those axe mains out there, and that's that determination level affects, get out of my view screen, affects your damage on certain other abilities. Now, I don't have an exact list, but I know for sure it works on counterpunching, specifically the discipline omnicell ability. I'm assuming it works on the other omnicell abilities and maybe even some lantern abilities. But if you're an axe main, definitely go test this out and see what it works on. I'm just going to show you some proof right here. I'm at 0 determination. So I'm going to go ahead and pop a counterpunch here with pulse on, because I got 1837, I think it just said there. I missed the last couple numbers here. So I'm just going to go ahead and get some determination levels really quick. I honestly should have done overheads for that. Alright, let's get one more axe throw in here, so we can see some for sure increases, because the increase from 0 to 1 isn't super great, I'm going to be honest. And make sure I have pulse up again. And let's do another counterpunch here. 2,100. So there's your proof that the determination level affects your omnicell damage, at least on discipline. So have fun with that, axe mains. Alright, this section is going to be about special attacks that hit multiple times. These typically work against you when you're trying to gain the benefit of buffs and whatnot. So this is something that you could pretty easily figure out if you played around with it in-game, but most specifically for newer players, try to keep this in mind when you're building in your buffs and stuff for a weapon that the specials do not count. So to prove this, I'm going to do a very simple demonstration with repeaters. You'll see that I'm gaining stacks of Berserker right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and shoot my full bore, and you'll see that I hit many times and didn't gain any Berserker stacks. Some abilities like this that hit multiple times only give you 1 stack for the whole ability, and some of them give you 0. So that's kind of something you really need to keep in mind if you're thinking, oh cool, you know, Berserker, I can gain a ton of stacks by, you know, doing this special or whatever, because it usually doesn't work. Typically how this works is if you're doing something that's a ranged attack, like full bore chamber or Molten Edict, meatballs, they do not give you buff stacks. The only exception is basic attacks from repeaters. So try to keep that in mind when doing that. The other thing is that consuming buffs, like this red orb here, you see how it's got 3 stacks on it right now. I'm going to go ahead and shoot. It eats them up, and the first 3 ticks of damage each consume one of the shots. So it works the opposite way when it consumes positive buffs. Like I said in the beginning, it works against you. That way you can't grab a red orb and then get a ton of benefits from from one consumption of the orb. So this is just something that I thought was kind of sort of kind of hidden, but also sort of kind of useful to know, so I threw it in here. All right, we got this section here on boosting core damage as opposed to other types of damage. Now, when you're playing weapons like Warpike, you're going to be extremely tempted to take things that increase all your wound damage if you're going for a wound build. Now, this is great if you're like really running something that's like super hyper focused on wound damage, but typically you don't need to worry about that so much. Like, you're going to want to run your main abilities like Acidic, because that's where you're getting massive amounts of wound damage, but you don't necessarily need to run things that only increase your wound damage by a small amount. Typically things that say flat damage is small increases. You almost never want to run those. So just try to keep in mind, if you want to boost your part damage, you want to boost your wound damage, or even your stagger damage, boosting your core damage also increases those numbers by the same amount. So take that to heart. I hope you enjoyed my bunny suit. All right, guys, we have this one I actually only just found out a month or so ago. This has to do with modifiers, behemoth, hunt modifiers, whatever you want to call them. These things typically pop up during escalations and trials. So the specific example I'm going to give you right now is from current week's trial modifier. You'll see it says Deep Freeze, frost damage is increased. Now, that means all frost damage is increased, which means your frost damage is increased. Now, this particular week, that's not super useful because it's a behemoth that I am not 100% sure, but I think is immune to the frost debuff. But there are definitely some other weeks. I think Quill Shot week is one of them, where Deep Freeze is one of the modifiers, and you can apply the chilled status to him really, really, really fast with that. Now, keep in mind, frost damage is kind of misleading. It does not mean damage with a frost weapon. So if you're running Pangar weapon, for example, you will not do more damage. What frost damage means is that it's kind of a hidden number. The frost status effect threshold, you're going to do more damage to that. So if you had a frost weapon, let's say, and you shot him, and it did, I'm just going to make up a number, it did 100 frost damage, now it's going to do more than that. So if his frost damage threshold was 2,000, now you're going to reach that faster with a fewer number of hits. So that's really all that means, but it's something that's kind of wild. I thought that also benefits you and not just the behemoth you're fighting. All right, let's get into one of my personal favorite sections. This is the section about Cascade, and this is actually the section where I learned something new while I was double checking my info on this one. So let's first get into looking at the Cascade, what it says. Now, ranks 1 through 3 says randomly generates one of the following boosts: healing, stamina, power. And then on 4, 5, and 6, it says stamina boost duration increased, which is true. It goes from 10 to 15 seconds. On 5, it says healing boost also grants shields. It grants a 100 shield bonus. Now, the interesting thing about that is the duration on that shield is indefinite, and it is the only indefinite shield bonus you can get in the game. This leads to all kinds of ridiculous things that you can do with it, like hit for 100,000 damage with a shield slam using the Bastion Omnicell, but don't think you're going to get any good trials times with it because you cannot generate Cascade orbs at the start of a trial menu, so don't even bother. It's also pretty difficult to do in hunting grounds because you can't use your lantern unless you're in a combat zone. So unless you can like find a little nook somewhere where you can just sit there and spam Cascade, then it's not going to work very well for you. But the more interesting thing is that I might as well cover the top one. The power boost duration goes from 3 uses to 5 uses, and then of course chance for a purple skittle to give you invincibility for 6 6 seconds, I think, or is it 10 seconds? I don't remember. But anyway, the interesting thing that I discovered that was new is that the amount of benefits you get from Cascade can be manipulated, or not the amount, the particular bonuses that come up from Cascade can be manipulated if you reduce the level of your Cascade cell. So as you can see here, I only have +1 Cascade, and according to this, it should generate healing, stamina, or power. But every time, stamina. 100% of the time, with only 1 level in it. And I don't know why it feels like it needs to say that it can give you all 3. I don't know why they can't just say that it only gives you stamina, but that's just how it works. Now, granted, this only lasts for 10 seconds, but you can manipulate this to great benefit to weapons where you want to have infinite stamina on, especially weapons like Axe, where you're going to be doing hold attacks. There's another stamina. And it's just great. You can just like throw, it's the only cell I can think of where you want a +1, other than maybe Pulse. But yeah, you can just throw that on there. And if you're curious, Cascade 2 drops only stamina and healing. It does not drop power. So that is 100% something you can use to your advantage if you really, really, really want those stamina cells there. All right, I got a little bit of interesting AI information for some of you guys here. This one isn't super useful, but I mean, it does help to know how to do certain things in this game. So I'm just going to show you how you can bait if you really wanted to, or avoid wow, okay, never, too fast. Bait or avoid behemoths getting into healing themselves. So there's a couple things that you're going to want to avoid in order to do that. And the first thing, do this a little slower. Okay, now he seems to not want to take any damage at all. Okay, now you can proc this with as little as what do I want to say? As little as missing only a quarter health. Now, if you bait a behemoth away from the ether vent, or the fight just happens to take you away from the ether vent after he finishes his charge AI here, he's tired from his charges because he's a lesser Ember main. Now he's going to go straight for that healing. See, he just healed. So definitely try to avoid getting too far from the ether vent in hunts, and they will not go heal themselves. Another thing you can do is get to a spot where the behemoth can't get to you. Sometimes you might have to be up higher than others, and they will also go heal themselves. I don't know if he's going to do it right now or not. Typically, they don't heal themselves twice in a row. But that is another way that behemoths will go heal themselves, is if you perch yourself up on a cliff where they can't get to you. So that is why he just did it again right there. Must have been some lagged AI from that for some reason. Oh, that's why the first one died so fast. I forgot I had Pangar weapon on. Boom. So yeah, just try to avoid getting too far away from that vent, and they shouldn't ever heal themselves. Alright, almost done. For this one, this is something that I had discovered totally kind of by accident, just while like looking at cooldowns and stuff, is that Molten has a hidden buff that it doesn't tell you about. And it's not super big, it's not like it's game-changing or anything, but it tells you that it spawns Molten Hearts that give you increased attack speed and movement speed and immunity to burning, and that's all well and great whenever you deal damage. So let's grab a Molten Heart, And let's look at the cooldown here. You see how fast it's spinning down. Now, if you grab another Molten Heart, it refreshes the cooldown. And it's kind of hard to notice at first, but every time you grab another Molten Heart, it decreases the speed at which the buff disappears. You'll notice it's getting slower and slower and slower. And eventually, it gets to the point where it starts crawling almost. And this is basically just increasing the duration on the buff. So I believe this stacks to about 10 times, and just massively increases the amount of time that you can go without actually needing to grab a Molten Heart buff. And I just thought that was a really interesting kind of mechanic that they added to the Molten Heart that they just don't tell you about. Look at that, it's crawling. I believe it ends up being about, it's at least 30 seconds, I think, is the cap. Maybe it may be a minute, I don't know, but it's just one of those like kind of bizarre things that you learn about the game as you play it more. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. Alright, last thing I'm going to get into, this one's sort of useful, especially for people that like to one-shot things and whatnot. And that's the fact that some amps in escalations, namely the big one is Virulent Impact, are actually, they damage their, or they calculate their damage based on display damage rather than the core damage that you're doing. Now, most abilities, you use them and they go off the core damage. So like if I were to, grab a red orb and boom, I shoot it, it does more damage based on the core damage. So it doesn't take into account cells like Sharpened. But Virulent Impact, the big one that I'm making my example, goes off your display damage. So if the part's not broken, specifically, and you hit it and you have cells on that boost part damage like Sharpened, the number that pops up is in yellow damage. That's your display damage. So that's showing how much part damage you're doing. And for some reason, they will calculate their damage bonus off the display damage. And that can give you ridiculously huge damage numbers. And that's how you get YouTubers that will show you like, oh, look at me, I just hit this Malkurion for 250,000 damage, or I hit this thing for, so much ridiculous high number damage. It's because they're taking advantage of things like that. And while this isn't really practical in making builds other than for the purposes of bragging, hey, I hit Malk for 250,000 damage, it's not super useful. And I also feel like this is something that most of the YouTubers don't even tell you. They're all like, hey, look at this build, I did this much damage. It's like, yeah, but you're not explaining how. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as my final tip. I really hope you guys learned at least one thing out of this video and enjoyed it, and my incredibly boring voice, and I hope it didn't put you to sleep. So, if you like it, I am trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark, so I would love more subscribes. I love you guys. I've gotten about 60 or so subscribes in the last 2 days alone. So you guys are fantastic. I love you. I try to reply to everybody that leaves a comment on my page. If you ask for something stupid like a Chainblade build, I'm just going to tell you no because I hate Chainblades. But I at least tell you. I'm just like I don't like to do content that I don't enjoy. But I do actually have one Chainblade build. I guess just kicked me for inactivity there. I do have one Chainblade build. It's in my one of my videos that I did a couple of months ago for the Omnicell update. I think it's called like one build for each weapon Omnicell update or something like that. So they might be slightly dated, but for the most part, if you just match the perk summaries, you should be fine with the builds. And on that note, I would like to thank you guys all again, and I will catch you later.